Perfect. You can go into the presenters mode.
Is that it? Are you able to see it?
Yes, you all set.
Oh wait, what happened to the? I lost the presenter mode. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Erete Corbett. I am a research scientist at Google. My co-authors are Denton, also at Google, and Sheena Erete at University of Maryland. So, as the previous papers in the session and the session itself has made clear, we're clearly in a moment where we're not even at a participatory turn in AI. It's almost an understood thing that we all have to do, and we need to figure out how to do it better. And I thank the previous papers for setting that up. It can save me a lot of time here. But obviously, enabling participation in AI is always going to bring about a question about power. And at a base level, what this paper was about is trying to provide a way to compare different approaches to participatory AI, which is important for setting expectations and creating accountability between researchers and practitioners developing systems and the general public. So in particular, the main idea for this project came from this quote from Sherry Arnstein, who is a famous public planning scholar. And she once wrote that participation without redistribution of power is an empty and frustrating process for the powerless. So for Arnstein, participation is power. It is a way of transferring power. But obviously, the ways in which someone participates will determine how much power they are actually transferred in a process. And so Arnstein became famous for this diagram you're seeing here, this ladder of citizen participation. And what this does at a base level, it provides a framework to understand the amount of power given to people based on the approach taken to participation. So you can imagine, being informed about a project that's happening in your neighborhood through a survey or a newsletter is a very different kind of power that you're given if you're in a full partnership around that project, right? You're at the table. So these are each one of these as it goes up, the people have more power. So the idea behind this project in this paper was to, given the success of Arnstein's work in public planning and the political science, was to think about, well, what could this do if we applied it to the current participatory turn to AI? Right? Can we use this as a way to help understand and distinguish different kinds of participatory approaches? And so with that, this is the exact research question, right? So, can this ladder be used as a useful analytical lens for understanding power and public participation in AI? So it's not so much a literature review, it is more an analysis of the ladder itself and its utility as a framework. Again, this is something that's made for public planning scholarship, many, many years ago before I was born. It had nothing to do with technology. So can it be applied to something like AI? It's a completely different context, completely different time. So I'm not going to bog you down with these boring details on the methodology, but at a high level, pretty straightforward. ACM digital library search, had a bunch of keywords. And again, what is the goal here? Our goal was to collect a corpus of papers to compare and read the latter against, as opposed to doing a more extensive literature review. To that end, we found 62 papers based off of our criteria. We ended up with about 21 final papers. And then from there, what we did at a base level, and you can read the paper for more details, is we read and compared how each of these papers described this participatory process. And then we ranked the paper according to the latter. And then we reflected on the utility of the latter as an analytical lens. So two parts of finding. So first is just the base ranking of the papers. Where did they fall on the ladder? And so this Fernando, I think, was the second presentation. We must be onto something because we found the same thing, right? Most of the papers are some form of consultation. As you can see, there's not a lot at the top, citizen control or delegated power. The vast majority of papers are below consultation or informing. And so if you were concerned about people having more power and the development of AI, this would be disturbing to you. However, the second part of the findings, like I said, is reflecting on the challenges of applying the latter. So, and trying to use the latter as an analytical lens to read against these papers, three issues sort of kept coming up, and I found them to be quite interesting. The first two have to do with the actual writing styles of the papers and the presentation. So for one, the papers are often depoliticizing the process and the decisions that are made. Notably, there was a lot of lack of reflexivity and the sort of tendency for objectivity, which I understand as computer scientists and people who are building AI systems, this is our inclination, but it's surprising that you would write a paper about participation in a system and then implicitly it's political, but then you write about the paper in a completely depoliticized way. And this is would pop up in some of the papers every now and then, so I don't want to overstate the extent that is the case, but it was. The second point on missing details is that there were a lot of just key design decisions and constraints left out. So if I end up designing a participation process in one way based off of my relationship with a funder or some other constraint that I'm having with another project, and I'm not reflecting on that, then it can be hard to assess the actual power given to people. And then the third one, outdated language, actually it has nothing to do with the actual writing of the papers themselves, and it has it's more to do with Arnstein framework itself, because she is a true believer in direct democracy and a very high level of control for citizens. So she writes about the lower rungs in a very disparaging way. To her, anything below control and delegation is nonsense or placation and all these other kinds of things. So that made it hard to apply it to these papers where you can, make a very reasonable argument for people learning about just being informed about an automated decision-making system, or, hey, we consulted on this program that's happening. So there's a little conflict in there. But let me give you just one example of consultation. A paper that I actually love by Wendy Brown is toward algorithmic accountability. And so this paper sort of exemplifies all of that bunch of papers that fell on the consultation rung. And so, what happened in here briefly is that they did a series of workshops with stakeholders around algorithmic decision making in child welfare. So the workshops they did with these stakeholders created really rich dialogue, parents, caseworkers, other kinds of folks, where they really got to express their concerns about how the system was used and how it might be used in the future. And so again, Brown's study would fall on consultation. And according to Arnstein, a key defining aspect of consultation is when citizens may indeed be heard and hear, but lack the power to ensure their views will be heeded by the powerful. And so, again, very critical. But here in Brown's workshops, and I love this paper, but, the stakeholders are heard and heard, or can hear and are heard. But because this dialogue takes place outside of the actual development process, ultimately their concerns may not be heeded. And even in fact, in the paper, the county where this work took place already had that algorithm in use. So, in the paper, they talk about, hey, it might do something in the future, but as of now, that's all we have. So Arnstein's not a big fan of that, but it shows you the conflict between her framework and these papers. So, let's just briefly some of the findings. You can read the paper and see how we characterize the other rungs. But for now, to go back to this research question, can the latter be a useful analytical lens for understanding power and public participation in AI? I will say no at this point. I don't think it can. I think we might have to use Fernando's framework. It sounds like that one is way more extensive and updated. But this one itself, even though it is the OG framework, I don't think it works. If it were to work, or if we were to create conditions for that latter to be a useful analytical lens, three things would have to happen. We'd have to have more reflexivity by people writing, right? There's way too many views from nowhere in these papers. We have to report more detail on the design decisions, right? So the design and participation process is as important as the thing the participation is being brought to bear upon. You have to reflect on those decisions in a way that I think design researchers are sort of trained to do. Research by design people are, in ways that other sorts of scholarly training are not. So that's the second one. And then more politicization, right? So again, participation is an inherently a political process. So to write about it in an objective and or technical way is a little odd. And I think this is the point. So in other words, if we were to do these three things, we could possibly use the latter or some other framework in these papers. And it would definitely help us to be able to distinguish the amount of agency people are getting in these different processes. And so I will end there. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting, and I love the call out to the RNC slider. I guess could you try to elaborate more on like why the outdated language for like pretty much everything below this whole realm of participation is a bad thing? Because like couldn't one also argue that like things like tokenism and other stuff on the lower on the ladder are bad things, and like more power to the people and like more participation is a good thing generally. So I just wanted to understand like that point a little bit better. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's my personal opinion. Even this critique of Arnstein is not even my own critique, right? So historically, if you read the sort of discourse around that framework, there are people that are I'm a computer scientist and a digital humanities people, but you can talk to some political scientists and social scientists, and full direct democracy oftentimes does not end up well for anybody. So and there are points in times where one could be more appropriate than the other. But I guess the critique that I have of her and that other people's have had is that all of those rungs are a tool. And just like if you have a tool belt, there's, the screwdriver is good for this, the hammer is good for this. And so, yeah, does that answer your question? It's my own personal opinion that I think those different, the other rungs can be used at different times and not in a nefarious way. That's the other thing. Oh, I forgot. There's so much in there. Go read the paper. The other thing is that whenever a lower rung appears, there's always a nefarious intent attached to that. Right? So it's always as if someone is trying to screw someone over because we're doing informing, and like the framework itself doesn't provide language or space for hey, actually this is all we could do, or we try to do something else and we're here. So it makes it kind of hard to use it in a very robust way.